Some buttons here today. I am joined by Jean Scott from the PT Council of New Zealand and of course Bevan, our presenter. I will hand you over to Jean in just 1 minute, but first of all let me just explain, if you have any questions along the way for Bevan today, in that GoToWebinar control panel that's on your screen, you can type in your questions at any time you like into the questions section of that GoToWebinar control panel. And then we will pass them on to Bevan probably at the end of the session. And he'll answer them for everyone to hear. So let me hand you over to Jean Scott. Jean.
Hi, good afternoon. It gives me great pleasure this afternoon to introduce Bevan James Isles to you. Bevan has been in the fitness industry for 15 years. He's driven by 6 values in life: love, freedom, honesty, health, growth, and happiness. He's a training facilitator and presenter for Les Mills International in New Zealand. Bevan's been an Ironman in the past and also a marathon athlete. He speaks on a regular weekly podcast and he writes for the Christchurch Press and other magazines. He's also bringing a book out later this month, and he's developed the Mile High Runner, so he coaches and helps athletes in Christchurch with their running technique. So it gives me great pleasure to introduce Bevan.
Hey guys, thanks Jean. Before I even get rolling, I have to say a big thank you to Jean Scott for asking me to do this. Jean Scott, I'm sure you guys who are listening to this understand how much work she does to help fitness professionals, and I always admire just her commitment to making our industry a bigger and better thing. So thanks for introducing me, Jean. So today, guys, I've kind of put together this slideshow, and I kind of, I thought there was lots of things I could offer, and I kind of thought I wanted to offer maybe a different perspective on how to be successful in your fitness career. And in doing this, I have to admit, it's probably very much scaled on or modeled on the experiences I've had in my career. And I just wanted to share some insights into, what is it that helps people have a long career? And because the fitness industry, while it's a very rewarding industry, it's definitely got a lot of challenges that come alongside it. So I thought, if someone who's been around the block for a while, I could maybe share some little things and kind of little tidbits to give to you guys. So as I thought about the talk, I kind of really thought, well, one of the great things about our job is it's one of the most satisfying job in the world. Like we make a difference in people's lives, and what we get back from that in a mental way is such a rewarding thing that makes it very, very attractive for us. One of the downfalls of our industry is that our passion becomes almost our weakness. And what I mean by that is that we almost allow our passion to justify certain things that aren't so great about our industry, and one of those is the financial aspect of our industry. Like if you look at the work we do in society, the kind of the incomes as a mean or as an average over our industry don't really represent the kind of work that we do, and I think there's a lot of things that can help us do that. So when I thought about the talk, I kind of thought that there were kind of 2 key aspects that we want as in the industry. And I think ultimately what we want is we want influence. And I know for myself, I've always wanted to have a big impact on the most amount of people that I can have that impact on. And when it comes to our industry, we have this real fortunate position to be able to influence people to do better things in their life. And I always find it interesting. I always think that us people in the fitness industry probably get an unfair amount of respect in society because most people find exercise so hard, whereas for us, we don't actually find it hard because we love it. So the idea of us going out and doing a run or a class or some exercise, it's not the mind battle that most people have in society, but because we can find it easy, others look at us and see us in a light that gives us a platform for influence. So I think ultimately, I know in my own career, one of the things I've always tried to do is spread my influence in a way that I think is powerful for my community and the people I get to touch. The second part I thought was important to talk about was the income side of our industry. And again, like I was saying, like I was speaking to a guy yesterday who was a business owner, and he was talking about his son's getting into IT, and his son, who's only 18 now, will be on a wage of around $150,000 within the next 5 or 6 years. And if we look at our industry, well, that's a real top-end kind of income for our industry. And so there's this real, again, kind of disconnect between the work that we do and the income we have. So today I thought I'd share with you guys kind of some thoughts on what I believe can help you have more reach and more influence on your community and actually get a career where you get financially rewarded for the work that you've done. And I've kind of broken this down to 3 stages, so 3 kind of fundamental stages of your career. And I've called the first stage, and it's very much like a timeline that I'm looking at here, but I've called the first stage very much survival. And this is when you're just new to the area and to the industry. I will say that this is very much kind of based on someone who's looking at probably more of the personal training side of the industry. So this is, the whole talk's kind of based around that, but I'm sure there'll be crossover for other areas as well. So survival is the first part of your career is often the hardest part of your career, because people come into this industry and they think they can make a lot of money really quickly, but it's actually not the case. It's pretty tough in this first section of your career. And so when we think about survival, I believe there's some really key fundamental things that you need to think about. The first about fitness, but I really believe that, you know, those first kind of year to 18 months to 2 years are really tough in the industry to make good money. And if you've got these big debts beside you as you're kind of trying to make money there, it's going to make it harder, which is often one of the reasons why people don't last in the industry. So kind of my first point of survival phase is live cheap. You know, you'll go without your extravagance now, but if you do fundamental work well, the money will come eventually. So live cheap and stay away from debt. The next point that I want to make is that in your first stage, if we think about building a business career, one of the things you find really interesting with new personal trainers is that they come on and they've got all these big picture ideas. They think they're going to change the world, and so they put all their energy into trying to create the next big thing. But actually, the business work they need to be doing right now is basic customer service kind of business work. And in your first stage, because when we think about the fitness industry, basically we're a customer service industry. So in this first stage of your career, as you think about developing your business, all your energy should be going into small business, customer service type of systems and ways of running your business. When someone comes and see you, do you have a follow-up email system? Do you have a way that people can get in contact with you easy? When someone spends time with you, do they feel they're getting more value for their money than what they are paying for you? And would they want to tell their friends about it? And as you develop your service in this kind of survival phase, is how do you systemize that so it's not just that one day of the week I do it well and the rest of the time I'm kind of a bit Mickey Mouse about it. So the second point in the survival phase is to really just think of yourself as a very small business owner who's trying to do amazing customer service. The next thing I think that is a real fundamental thing to do in the survival phase is start to understand your personal management skills. So simple things like learn to become good at prioritizing your life. Learn to become good at being focused around when you do certain aspects of the roles of your life. So, you know, plan a programming time in your week. Plan time where you're actually going to do some marketing so you can do some phone calls. Plan time where you're even just planning your own time. One of the problems with our job is that there is no set timetable and we have a lot of freedom. So if you've gone from a 40-hour week where you have to be at 8 till 5 and you know someone else tells you what to do, when to do it, it's kind of easy to find a routine. But in our job, we're kind of coming and going all the time. You know, you might have 2 clients in the morning and then someone at lunchtime and then 3 clients at night. And a lot of time can be wasted because you don't have very good personal management skills. So in this kind of survival phase, one of the big areas you want to develop is how do I function well so I can be as productive with my time as possible. And that's where you'd be doing, you know, outside of sessions, you'd be doing all that customer service stuff that I talked about earlier. Next up, I think this is a really important aspect to think about, and I know kind of there might be a bit of an emphasis on money here today, but is you've got to find where the money is in this first stage. Again, if you think you're going to build the next big thing, like I've spoken to so many personal trainers over the years, and they come in, and the stuff they're talking about trying to achieve is what they should be thinking about 3 or 4 years down the piece. And in the survival phase, you're just trying to think, well, where's the money that's going to get me through living the life that I need to live right now? And it's a really important way of looking at the world, because if you can see that, okay, well, while I would like to do, you know, big group training, actually right now there's more money in me just chasing good, small group sessions and some one-on-one time, and to put your energy into that so you are finding that security of income, which allows some breathing space in this first phase. So really do just think, where is the money as I look at this world right now? It's an interesting comment. There's a really good book, I can't remember what it's called, but there's a book from this guy who studied billionaires, and he was saying, what's the difference between the person who's worth $1 million to someone who's worth, like, $20 million or $1 billion and so on? And one thing that you'll hear people say is, if I follow the passion, the money will come. And if we look at it, that's actually not true. Like, if we look at it in life, a lot of people have passionate roles in life but don't have the financials that come with that. And again, as I said earlier, our industry really represents that. There's a lot of people who are very passionate but are on the bones of their ass. And if we think about what this guy's point was, that what the people who tend to be worth a lot more money do is that they go, where's my passion? And now where is the money within my passion? And then what they do is they build business around that. And I think it's just a really good way to think about how you get through your survival phase. My next point, and this is an important point that will come through again and again, is you need to what I do. Now, that database is worth a lot of money to me in my products. So, for example, with my running group, recently we put on a technique day. I sent out one email and we sold 70 packages in 2 days. Now, that's only because for the last 7 years I've been collecting my database. And what you want to be thinking about right from the start is, sure, I want to build a database of people who know me, but how do I capture them in my world with something like a MailChimp or something like that, so that over time I build bigger database, and actually as I grow in my job, I can then go to my database with products and services, and actually it makes it easier for me to sell my products. And in this first stage, you really want to be having a way to build that database, and things like MailChimp or those types of web-based products are a really great way of doing that. Ideally, if you get to the end of your survival phase, and if I'm going to be honest, a lot of personal trainers don't get to this phase. Like, I know I've worked at a gym for years and years, and the amount of personal trainers who have survived that first 18-month period is actually pretty minimal. And so I kind of believe if you do this stuff well, the stay away from debt, customer service, personal management skills, focus on where the money is to make my income, and starting to build database, you really start to get to a place where you're probably earning a good amount of money, a good secure income. And that's where I kind of start to go into the second stage of what I see as a fitness professional's career. And then the second phase, I really see that you want to become a local leader in your area. And when I think about being a local leader, I've always thought to myself, how can I become the name in Christchurch that people think of when they think of exercise? And when you think about that, I'm sure everyone listening to this right now probably has that person in their local area who really stands out as being that person that, if opportunity around fitness were to come forward, that would be the person other people would think of. Like, I know Gene Scott's another one in Christchurch, that Gene and I would probably get a lot more opportunity than other people in Christchurch, just because we've built this name around ourselves that's made us be perceived as the local leaders in fitness. So at this stage, your business, your personal training business, is probably going pretty well. Now what we are trying to do is starting to get bigger and have bigger influence and have bigger reach, which leads to bigger opportunity. When we think about the local leader aspect, the first one I think is what happens for people who get stuck in stage one. So you might get to stage one and you may get really competent at stage one. And then what you find for a lot of personal trainers is they get very time poor. And the reason is because they become a one-man band who feels they have to do everything themselves. And you'll see a lot of personal trainers who have been in the industry for a long time, and they'll earn a good living, but they're never really going anything more than that. You know, there's a cap on what they can achieve based on time, resources, and, you know, their own energy. So one thing we want to be doing as we become a local leader is we're trying to get more time back so we can work on more important projects that help us spread our influence and our time. So one thing in doing that is, as you start to get past stage one and start to make money, is trying to find pull back from the few things and develop systems around the work that you're doing. So I know with my running business, for example, when I first started doing my running business, I did everything, every part of my running business I did. And some of it I did amazingly well, and some of it I did really crap. But over time, I knew my goal was to get myself out of my business. So as soon as I started to make a little bit of profit, I started putting some time aside of my own time to start to create systems so that I could offload and go into my second point to delegate work that I don't need to do. And ultimately, as you're becoming a local leader, this is a really important part of what you do, because if you want to have bigger reach, you need more time and resource. And so once you create systems, the whole idea is, how do I get myself out of actually running my systems? So, like for example, now I have an admin girl, my partner works on my business, my running business. I only work about 10 hours on it a week now, and I put other energy into bigger things. So I've delegated a lot of the work that I used to do in a way that's actually, I've probably got people who are more effective at doing it, achieving much bigger things than I could have done if it was by myself. And that's where you're learning to delegate and letting go. I think one of the things about delegation as well, there's a couple of things that are really important. You can often pay people a lot cheaper than what you can charge yourself out at. So I tend to charge myself at a certain rate. Now, the people I use for my admin, I probably, I can pay them a lot less than my personal charge out rate. So it's actually much wiser for me to put my energy into getting them to do what they're great at, and me to be focusing on doing what's going to get the best return for myself. The other thing I've discovered is that if you get the right people, they'll do 10 times better work than what you could have done by yourself, and you're better off just focusing on your strengths. So for example, I'm a real good ideas person. I'm really good at sales and marketing, and I'm really good at kind of product creation. I'm not very good at follow-up. I get a bit bored and kind of customer service stuff, but nowadays what I have is I've got this amazing team of people who are creating these great systems and great, advancing systems that I came up with in ways I could have never seen possible. The next thing to think about is, once you start to become a local leader, you've got to find your angle. And when I talk about finding your angle, is what are the people going to know you for? And I know for myself, when it comes to my content creation, I've only ever tried to be seen as someone who focuses on the mind of exercise. You'll never see me write a blog about how much you should eat or what exercise you should do. I've really tried to focus on one niche in fitness, because there's so many different niches, and just try to be the expert in this area. So if someone's going to try to write a piece on a paleo diet, it's not something I'm going to talk about. If you want to look about the mind of exercise, that's what I'm the guy, and I want to be the guy that people are going to think about in this angle here. I think you're much better off to be known for my content creation. I have my mind work, and then my other angle is my running business. And it's been really interesting with my running business, because we've always focused on just being the running solution. We haven't tried, we could have done circuits, we could have done all these other things, but we thought, no, let's just be known as the running angle. And some other products in our city have tried to be more than one thing, and they actually failed because they're trying to be lots of things to lots of people. And in my mind, you can be one great thing in someone's mind. So it's something to think about as well. Then what you're trying to do is build your brand. So for myself, there's kind of two brands I'm trying to build. There's my name, and then there's my running business, my Extra Mile Runners. So when it comes to building your brand, as you want to become a local leader, is how do you become that person that everyone else will think of? And again, years ago, that's what I thought about. And how do I become the name in Christchurch that people think about in fitness? And to be honest, I'm trying to get more New Zealand now. So I'm trying to go, how do I become the name in New Zealand that people think of when they think about fitness? And so when you think about building your own brand, this is where, if you do amazing systems, amazing delegation, and you know your angle, then you really had time to do this. And again, if I go back to stage one kind of professionals, they're often very time poor. And so at this stage, it's, hopefully you've got good systems, good people working for you, which allows you more time to devote to devoting your brand work. Like lots of us want to do blogs, lots of us want to do podcasts, but it's always the last thing on the list that never gets done. So you never actually devote time to building your brand. And for me, once I got to that point where I was delegating, it was like, well, how do I build my brand to a bigger thing? I'll go a little bit further into that when we get to stage 3, but I think the other thing around branders is don't be afraid to put your hand up for opportunity. So, for example, I write for our local newspaper here at the Press, and that's given me massive exposure in my city. It's been really great for my brand. Now, I rang the Press and said, "Do you want me to write a free piece for you?" And I made sure I wrote a really good piece. They liked it, and then they asked me to do a couple more free ones, and then eventually they came back to me and said, "We really like your work. Can you write for us as a regular, contributor to the paper?" And that was because I was the one who was pushing my brand forward. And I think that often, and especially for the New Zealand people listening, is we have this thing of I shouldn't put myself forward, and actually I think it's our role to put ourselves forward. Now, how you do that will depend on your personality. I try not to be arrogant in how I do it. I try to do it in a way that's really real, but I think it's just a really important thing to be aware of. The next thing is build a bigger database. So again, just this whole time you're doing your work, you're trying to build a bigger database. And when you become a local leader, that becomes a bigger thing in itself, because if you're the person that people get to know, if you've got a great website that encourages people to get onto your database, or every time you do it, they do one of your products, or if you can be in a paper and they're going to give you a link to your website, all those little things help you build your database more and more. So that's kind of some key angles that I think about when I think about how to be a local leader. Now, again, you guys could probably add more to this, but I think these things are really important. First of all, we're probably really time poor, so systems, delegation is really important. Know what you stand for, build your brand around that, and then create a bigger database. Oh, sorry, there's one more. Learn higher level business. And I think this is really important. Now, when I think about our education as fitness professionals, now what we tend to find is that you'll get a lot of fitness professionals who spend a lot of time developing themselves around how to be better at delivering fitness. And I always think there's definitely a component of that needs to come within your world. So I would say, like you want to make sure you're up with the latest knowledge, the latest evolution of what's happening in our industry, and there's a certain level of commitment you need to that. But actually, the majority of your learning should go towards business. And again, what we have in our industry is we have a lot of great sole traders. So we have a lot of people who have a good one-man band business who can probably earn a nice living. But really, if we want to get to that next level, we've got to create business. And so when you get to this kind of become a local leader, if you think about your personal development, you need to start learning about higher level business. So learning about, how do you do marketing? How do you do team development? How do you actually ship a product? How do you learn about all those high level kind of business questions that you'd have to explore as you move further down your path? It's a really important thing. So many people in the industry lack business skills, and actually it's business people who do the best out of our industry. So at this stage, I really encourage you kind of learning your business your business trade. The next stage is, and it's the third stage of today's talk, is to build your $1 million product. So again, if we think back to our industry, really, how many people are driving Ferraris in our industry? And if we are going to be honest about it, it tends to be the business owners. It tends to be the people who owns the gyms. It tends to be the people who have the big products, or like a TRX or a Zumba, or those types of products are the ones who tend to make the biggest amount of money in our industry. And really, when we think about building your $1 million product, if we think about the 2 stages before this. Stage 1, survival, just get to making a living, get through that time well, basic business stuff. Then we go to stage 2, become a local leader. Then what you want to do is you want to start to use that influence to build a product that can actually have a massive return, not just on the money, I know I've called it a $1 million product, but on the influence that you can have within your community. So when we think about building a $1 million product, I think, again, if I go back to that point that I said earlier, is where is the money? And when we think about where's the money, we are now starting to think about, where is the big money in my industry? And then if I'm going to build a product that's going to bring a massive financial and influential return, where is the best use of my energy to put that forward? And really, I've kind of talked about this already, but I think you know what I'm talking about here, is that don't just say I'm passionate, say, okay, where is the opportunity to be able to make that money? I think the money thing's a really interesting thing, because one thing I've learned is, if I go back to influence and reach, years ago I had a friend of mine, a guy called Gordo, who was this amazing Ironman triathlete, and he made a lot of money at a very young age. So he kind of retired at 30 and became, you know, an Ironman basically. And I used to always think that if you want to change the world, just be the best that you can be, and you know, be the best version of yourself, and that will influence others to consider, you know, shifting within themselves. And there's definitely truth to that statement. But I remember Gordo once said to me, if you want to change the world, create business, because business has influence. And I have to admit, now that I've kind of gone further down this path, I have a lot more reach now with my running group than what I ever could have had if it was just me trying to be great. You know, the influence I'm having in my community is really massive, and it's because I've got a business that's doing important work. Now, my business can only work if I'm making money. I can only afford to do marketing because my business makes money. I can only afford staff because my business makes money. Now, because it's making money, then I can really spread my message in a way that I think is really important. So again, you know, this is really important stuff to think about as you get to stage 3 of your career. The next thing is your big picture, and I really, you know, when you get to this point, and I kind of feel this is where I am right now, is that once I think one of the important things that I understood in my late 20s was, wow, I do have influence. And once you understand that, there is that kind of, you know, with there comes a responsibility with that. And I've always thought, well, what do I want my influence to be? And that's where, you know, again, if you want to change the world, how do you want to change it? And so I've really tried to spread my influence and worked on my big picture. So there's that whole, and that's what I love about owning a business, because you own a business and you're spreading what you believe is important. So you may work at a gym and you may find it frustrating that who you work under doesn't necessarily sit along your values. Well, when you own a business, it's your values you're pushing forward. And so I really find that like my running business it's still the most rewarding work I do, because it kind of is a picture of what I think is important in my industry. So it's something to think about. The other thing to think about when we're talking about working on the big picture is, when you get to this stage in your career, you're only doing big strokes that make a big difference. So like, for example, before I was saying I only do about 10 hours work on my business a week, maybe 10 to 15, but all I'm doing now is big picture decisions. So I'm only doing the things that I'm really good at and that I really love, and that I've delegated a lot of the work that A, I wasn't good at, and B, wasn't a good use of my time. And now I'm in this place where I'm working on the big things that are going to take my business to the next stage. And I really think that as you get to this time, when you know, if you only have 15 hours, but that 15 hours is really powerful work, well, that's when you're going to be creating that bigger product. The next phase, I think that's really a good thing to think about here, is to use other people's platforms. So if we go back to the local leader and your brand, you know, at this stage it is very much about, you know, okay, well, I build a brand around myself. And what we want to do is if we build the brand of our business and our products, is we want to use platforms that other people already have to help us get bigger reach. So for example, I've done a reasonably good job of building an audience through my podcasting, through my blogging and stuff like that. So I probably have around maybe 30,000 people around the world who follow my work. Now, that's a good audience to have, but when I got into the press, I suddenly was exposed to another 100,000 people. And it's a really good way for me to build my platform, build my brand on somebody else's platform. When I've got a book coming out soon, and one of the things about the book was I could have self-published it, and to be honest, I probably would have made more money if it was about self-publishing, because I already have an okay size audience. But actually, if I want to have bigger influence and help more people exercise, I wanted to get to a bigger platform, and I went with a publisher because they showed me how they could get a bigger spread or bigger influence or bigger reach for my brand moving forward. So I've gone with a publisher and they've done a great job, and they've managed to get me on some of the big TV shows, they've managed to get me on some of the big TV radio stations. I wouldn't have been able to do that by myself. Now, through my publisher, they've exposed me to a bigger platform, which then gets me even to a bigger platform through TV and media like that. And that helps to build my brand, which has a massive flow-on effect on my businesses, but also on the reach that I can have in society. So as you get to this stage, is who has great platforms? Like, to be honest, I've worked for Les Mills my whole life, and I've been very fortunate to have a level of success with Les Mills, and I basically built my name off their platform. They have this massive platform, and I was very conscious early on was to build something outside of Les Mills, but a lot of people follow me just because they like my Les Mills work. And that's what we think about when we think about other people's platforms, is who has a platform that maybe I can add value to, or would be willing to see what I do, and how can I use that to build my brand even more. Next thing is build an amazing team, and I kind of already talked about this a lot, but I think, you know, like as a leader, I always think, well, what kind of leader are you? And it's one thing to have people working for you, but how do you build a team who is actually amazing? And to be honest, it's an area where I have real strengths, and I definitely have some weaknesses as well. And being a leader is it's a really great thing, because you have to confront your hard stuff in doing that, because you don't get to always do the nice stuff. But you know, how do you develop an amazing team? And when you think about your $1 million product, like the one thing Les Mills does amazingly well is they have a great training system for instructors. You know, they do just such a phenomenal job of that. So when I think about my running business, I was like, well, how do we create an amazing system for our coaches so that they can learn, and that our product is always an amazing product for our people to experience. So a big part of my job is, how do I keep developing training tools for my amazing team? And then, you know, on top of that, there's lots of aspects of this. How do you look after your team? How do you reward your team? How do you show them that you value them, and all those types of things? But one of your big roles at this stage is to really build that amazing team. Now you're going into high-level business. So now you are really starting to look at, as your business grows, you'll get presented with different kind of problems. It's been really interesting in Christchurch. We've had this, with the earthquakes, we had this building boom, and this guy I know was a very high-level businessman, and he's talking about how these building companies in Christchurch have experienced this growth that they just could have never prepared for, and they don't have any high-level business experience, and they're just going down this path, which is making them a lot of money, but it's actually, they're going to fail because they just don't get high-level business. And the questions you need to explore when you're trying to create $1 million product is a much different question than when you're trying to do the survival phase, which is just about basic customer service. So for me now, you know, I'm really looking at, you know, high-level marketing stuff. I'm really looking at high-level bookkeeping. I'm really looking at, you know, all those types of questions around, you know, if I'm going to have this bigger product, what are the, you know, you think about scale. As I scale to bigger levels, what are the bigger problems I'm going to have as I go into those, and how can I become better prepared as a business leader to be able to handle those times? So that's what you want to think about at that stage. And then ultimately, when you've built the $1 million product, it's about building a legacy. And like I was talking about before, you know, my running business, and we're still very much at the beginning of this build your $1 million product stage. We've still got a long way to go before we will achieve what we want to achieve. But I would like to think that the work that I've done and that my team have done has had a massive impact on the people we have touched and the community that we've been a part of. And you know, it's funny, as you age, I often think that, particularly as men, you know, a young man wants to be a warrior, and then, you know, you want to be wise, and then it becomes about your legacy. And ultimately, I think that if if my time does, and I've created this business that's helped thousands and thousands of people achieve, you know, a betterment of self through exercise, well, I feel my time on this earth has been used really well, and that's what it's about. And then ultimately, to step away, and when you do build the $1 million product, you know, like for example, we may always own our running business, but I might have people running it for me. We only do a couple of hours a week, and then I get this lifestyle, which is, you know, totally about what I want to do, and that's the benefit of building that big level product. So I suppose, you know, to kind of wrap things up. Again, this is very much based on my experience, and I'm sure certain people will take different things from it, different areas from it. But I think ultimately, you know, if there are 3 stages to our career, there is that survival phase, and it's hard. And to be honest, most people don't get through it. So really think of that basic level stuff that I've talked about in that there. Once you get through that phase, when you're in that comfortable place in your career, it's fine time to build your local legend, basically become the local expert. And in that time, really think about your angle, your brand, your database, and products that you'll be able to build in the future. And then ultimately, you want to be able to build that $1 million product. And if we go right back to the very start of this talk, where I talked about how satisfying this industry is, I found, even though my running product's not quite where, exactly where it's going to end up, the satisfaction I get from my running business is much higher than anything I've ever experienced. And also, my influence and the income is a lot better because that's doing as well. So that's kind of the key points of my message today. Just a couple quick things before we open up to questions. I have got a book coming out. As you can see, there's my cover of my book. It's coming out on, I think, the 14th of September. So look out for that. And if you know clients and that, again, everything I do is about the mind of exercise. So it's very much, it's all about that kind of stuff in this book. And each chapter starts with a story, which leads to a mind strategy and ways to apply those mind strategies. And if you want to check out any more work, you can go to bevanjameseyles.com. So if we want to open up to questions, feel free, and thanks for listening.
Bevan, awesome information. Thanks so much for sharing that. We do have some questions, so let me kick them off. Holly says, first of all, this is awesome. She really enjoyed the session. She's got a few questions for you. First up, she says, did you always know what you wanted to do?
Did I always know? For me, it's always come down to my three passions are people, fitness, and music. So it's always been, how do I get my life doing that all the time? No, to be honest, I kind of fell into things, and I think that's what happens in business is that you see a problem that needs to be solved. And that's what I love about business, because basically all business is problem solving. And so, for example, I never really, if you asked me before I started my running business, I never thought I wanted to do a running business. It was more team training became this big thing at the time. And I really saw a gap. While I think team training is good, I like the idea of people working towards a goal. And running just seemed a really good solution to that problem. And so I thought, well, I'll start this side project. And it seemed to work. And so I wouldn't say I always had, but I think that ultimately what I have always tried to think of is where are problems that need to be solved, and is the opportunity for me to be able to build business around that. So that's probably a good way of thinking about it.
Awesome. And I think you actually just inadvertently answered her next question, which was how did you come up with the idea of going from individual training to the business idea like the running business?
Well, so for me, like well, I've always more to that. So for me, the thing I found really fascinating is that, like, I love the gym, but almost the gym becomes a habit where people stop growing sometimes, and particularly in group fitness. Group fitness is a really good habit in people's lives, but they almost get to a point where the growth stops. And when through an athlete, the people who I see who get the most growth through exercise are people who seem to have a goal that excites them. They're around people that are doing a similar goal, and they're doing a movement they enjoy. And that was really what I thought about. And I thought, well, if I can create a group of people going towards the same goal, that could be a really powerful thing. And that was when that whole kind of team training thing first came on, and that putting those kind of pieces together made me put this together. And that's the thing, like, my business started out as a half marathon product, and it was a very small thing, but then I thought I'm not reaching as many people as I wanted, and I saw a problem, and I thought, well, why don't I do a Get Up to 5 product, and so on. So, again, something's going to come up into my head, and I'm just going to sit in it for a while and process it, and through that then I'll start to explore. Now, the great thing with my business, I've got my partner Joe, who's just like this rock star at organisations, so we complement each other's skills very well. And I think ultimately, if you know you're a detailed person, well, that's probably a really good way to do it. But if you know you're not, it'll probably just frustrate you. And I think with things like this, it's fundamentally, what do I know about myself? And if we take it back to personal management skills, those types of things is learning how I work. And often you'll read things around how other people work, and actually it's not going to work for you at all. So you're much better off to learn how I work, and and that's what I'll tend to do. So I'll think of a problem, I'll kind of intellectualize it within my head over a period of time, and then I'll try to come up with solutions. And I actually start doing, and then I kind of get into it. So again, I think ultimately learn yourself and learn what works best for you.
Great advice. Holly also asks, how often do you look at your goals?
So I'm very goal orientated. I'm like, I'm pretty anal. So I very much, so I have a little if you go to if you go to my website, oh, don't worry. I've got I have like a little book that I read every morning. It's like a 17-page. It's more of a big PDF document, and it's kind of just this big visual representation of who I am, what I want to achieve, and what I'm trying to do in my life. And so I kind of read that every day. It's just a 5-minute thing I do before I get out of bed. And it's just really, I almost think of it as my compass in life that just makes sure I'm staying on path and I'm not going too far off. And then I'll just, within that, there's a goals section which I'll tend to redo every kind of 3 or 4 months. But I'm not a long-term thinker. So as much as, like, you know, we want our running business to be in all of New Zealand, I know that's where we want to be, but I'm not someone who's putting a lot of energy into try to get all of New Zealand right now. I very much think that I'm much better off to focus on the next 3 months and go back to that question of what's the most important thing that I can do right now that's going to have the biggest impact.
Great, good one. Karina has said thanks for the great tips, and she says, do you have any suggestions or tips in customer service around being communicative without being pushy?
Yeah, I do actually. I think a really good technique is to learn the motivational interviewing technique. Motivational interviewing, if you don't know much about it, is it's a technique which it's designed for counsellors to work with alcoholics and or extremely addicted people who are quite destructive. And it's a very good skill. It's basically just a communication style, and its skills around how to communicate with people, which helps. It's designed to create change, and change only happens when we see it ourselves. And so basically, through the skills of motivational interviewing, you learn how to be the person who helps others realize that they need to change. And I know that when I learned about motivation, I spent a lot of time learning on it. I bought this really good workbook that kind of took you through drills and all the rest of it, and I know that once I learnt that, I had a much bigger impact on the people I was working around. So I would highly recommend anyone listening to this to learn the skills of motivational interviewing. And to be honest, I'd probably say for now that's the main thing. There's lots of things we could do, and again, there is that whole what's my style, you know, because some people like being the hard ass and some people don't. Like, I'm not very confrontational myself, but I do find that the techniques of motivational interviewing are very, very powerful in helping people change.
Great. Francisco says, thanks for the important points. They're explained in a really clear way, which is awesome. Now, the best part about it is that he says, I live in Buenos Aires, 4 million people city. Maybe the neighbourhood where I work at the gym has the population of one city in New Zealand. Yeah. What do you think about the gym as a starting point?
Yeah, so the gyms, well, it depends on the success of the gym, but like I always think that a lot of personal trainers come into a gym and they struggle. And like for example, I'm at Christchurch, and I'm not sure of our membership, but it's probably somewhere between 4,000 to 5,000 people. Now, if you're walking into a room or into a place that's got 4,000 people there, and you only need 20 to 30 clients, you should be able to make that work. And if not, it's not because the gym's a failure, it's probably because you're not looking at the way you're approaching things. Like if we go back to basic business in this, at stage one, is no new personal trainers do marketing. I never see new personal trainers do marketing, and it blows my head away. When I first started personal training, I did this campaign that created mystery in the gym. I had this prize draw. I started collecting my database straight away, and I instantly, my first week, I had 30 paying clients. Now, when you think about platforms, gyms are a really great platform for a personal trainer because you're walking into the place where people you know are wanting to do that thing that you're trying to sell. So I think gyms are a really great place to start. It's a lot harder if you're going to do it by a park by yourself because you know, like if you're at a gym and you're personal training and you're doing a really great job, people around you are going to see you and you may become a person in their mind. If you're at a park and it's just your mum's friend, well, who's going to see you and what reach is that going to have? So I do think gyms are a great place to start.
Awesome. You might again have touched on the answer to the next part of his question, but he says the database and the connections we create with people is a key, but what else did you do or think based on your experience? I'm
not quite sure of the question. So is it around database? I suppose I'll add one thing here, is you've got to be consistent. You've got to be consistent. Like, for example, as a content creator, I do this triathlon podcast. We've been going 7 years and we've never missed a week. I do a monthly fitness podcast. I've never missed a month. I write a blog every week and get it up on my website. You have to train people to know that you're going to deliver. And you've always got to deliver. I think you've always got to try to deliver high quality products. And so if you are going to write a blog, again, find your angle. but do something that's different, that adds a higher level of the content, because a lot of people, they just write something that you're another fitness professional's page, and it's just the same thing. You're not really differentiating yourself from the market. So, and again, that's that thing when we're time poor. It's that thing that never gets done. And you see a lot of personal trainers. I've got this website, and and 6 months later you'll go on there. They've got one blog post from a year ago, and so or 6 months ago. So I think ultimately, if as you get to that stage 2, and you're building your brand and that kind of your angle is, you've just always got to be delivering. Always be delivering.
Great. Avon asks, over your time, is there something that you've noticed in particular that convinces people to contact you initially? For example, through the website mail out or other materials. Is there anything that you found works better than something else?
Gee, that's a really big question. What works better than anything else? If I go to my early time, I think, and this is, I don't want to be arrogant in saying this, but I think I was really good at what I did within group fitness, and so that opened a lot of doors to me. I think there is that role model thing that actually helps early on, and it's very interesting. So, because what am I talking about here? So if we think about role models, is that a lot of people will want to be like their fitness professional. So what kind of role model are you? And like, I always find it interesting. I don't know if you've ever been fortunate to meet someone you admire in life, and when you admire that person, do they live up to the expectation you had for them? And often that's not the case. So you might meet someone who you thought was just a really amazing person, and then when you get to know them, you might discover that they're really good at this one thing, but they lack character in many other areas. And I think that's one of the hard things about being a fitness professional, is because people have these massively unrealistic expectations about us as people as a whole. Or they think we don't have any imperfections, which is so unfair and unrealistic. But I think that if you do live up to, if you do paint a picture that's really clear and honest about what you are, and you have credibility around what you are, then the influence you have, people are attracted to you more, and so then you start to be that person. And then ultimately, in that first stage is that role model thing. Like, what is going to be that thing that makes you look more like a role model? Like, I know, for example, me doing Ironman had a massive influence on my career because people saw me in a different light. It was really interesting as a group fitness instructor. Once I became an Ironman, people worked harder in my class because they saw me as an athlete. And nothing had changed about the way I taught my class. It's just their perception of me. And I do think that whole concept of managing my perception of me is a really important thing. And I've always thought that I want people that when they meet me, that I'm going to be the role model that over-delivers on the expectation they had. And actually, I think a big part of that is to be really real about what you are all the time. So to not create something that's not true. And I just think it's a really important part of it. Then I've found, as my career's gone on, it's because I've built a brand and this angle and all the rest of it, it becomes easy because you are the person that people think of. So like nowadays, people want to see my blogs, and then when I write a blog, people will contact me because they really enjoy my work. So, I think as long as you do quality work and you consistently deliver and you become that name in people's head, then that leads to pretty good opportunity.
Great. We've got another question from Karina. She says, do you work on a blog word limit, or how do you decide how long it should be?
So I'm lucky because I write for the paper, so they give me, I have to write under 800 words, so it's pretty easy. I think the thing around that is your job to figure out what works for your audience. So, like, I haven't really tried to push social media that much because I just haven't. But you might find that doing pictures with inspirational quotes that come from you, and to brand yourself along with those quotes, I think ultimately there's not a perfect answer to that. It's all like marketing. Marketing is a really interesting thing. Marketing is figuring out what works, and you'll spend money and time and resource to figure that out. And the more over time you market, the more you can understand what works to draw people to my products. And I think it's the same as a content creator. Is what you're trying to figure out is what works in people and drawing people to me. And a word count, the way you do it will be different for different people.
Great. We've got two more questions. Pete says he loves you on I Am Talk and Fitness Behaviour.
Oh, nice.
And
Thanks, Pete.
He says, my wife is a trainer and is in amazing shape. People are sometimes intimidated by her because of her level of fitness. So Do you have any tips on engaging beginner athletes who might feel a little bit intimidated?
Yeah, I think it's about being a real thing again, really, isn't it? Because I think, again, that's that perception of people think we're perfect. They think we're perfect people, and again, we're not. You know, far out. We're not. We're humans, and we've all got many faults within us. And it's just that, again, we're really strong at this thing that people struggle at, and I think what you want to do is to show the realness of your own struggles within that, and because there is value in being perceived as this really fit person, but there's, you know, if you become a bit disconnected to your people, will you lose them? And so, you know, just be honest about your own weaknesses and show your real self, I think, is a big part of it. I always think it's really interesting. It's a dangerous game to play if you want a long-term career, to make your image the thing that sells you. You'll see a lot of people who do really well selling their physical image as the way to make their money. And I think, you know, obviously it works. A lot of people desire a certain type of body, and it's easy for me to get up there and show my six-pack abs, but age is going to catch up eventually. And I know for myself, I always thought I want to be focused more on the mind side, and that was one of my motivations, because you know, in my younger days, I could have gone up and taken my top off and had photos to sell, you know, look like me. But I think ultimately, it's a dangerous game to play in the long term. So it's just something to think about as well.
Good one. And our final question today, Bevan, is would you recommend trainers seek assistance, for example, using a mentor?
Oh, for sure, definitely. I think, actually, I wrote a chapter about this in my book. I think there's a couple of things that are really important here. Mentors are so important in life, because mentors have the ability to see what we can't see. You know, like in any area, there's you know, there's this light that we have, a level that we see, and there's light that we don't see, or a dark that we don't see. And when it comes to having a mentor has more experience and has an insight, and even they can just ask questions that really kind of shift your thinking. But I will say, and I wrote a chapter about mentors in my book, and I will say, commit time to finding a great mentor. And I'll share what I'm talking about. So I play piano. I've been able to play piano for about 7 years, and I love it. I spend like an hour and a half a day playing a piano. And over time, I've had some tutors, and they've all been pretty good. But recently, I hooked up with this tutor who lived very close by to me, and she was phenomenal. Like, seriously, mistakes that I were making, I should have known years ago from the other mentors I'd had, but this lady just has this ability to see levels that are way higher than anyone's ever shown me before, and she has this amazing ability to show me how to overcome those levels. And I think while having a mentor is a great thing, one of the biggest things that people do that let them fall down in this area is that they don't do enough research on who is the great mentor. And so if you are thinking about using a mentor, actually do some research on, well, what is a great mentor, and who is a great mentor, and don't just read the references. Maybe see if you can ring someone who's worked with them, you know, because if you're going to spend time and money on someone to help you become better, you want to make sure it's the best person. And I just know from my piano experience, it was such a valuable lesson for me, because I've probably been half-hearted in my life in finding mentors, and I've fluked a few good ones and had some poor ones, whereas now, as the way I look at it, is that I actually want to spend a big amount of time really making sure I choose a great mentor. So if we think about my piano, you know, I'll spend thousands of dollars with this lady. So would you just go and buy the first car you saw, or would you do some research? And often, you know, with your mentors, do the same thing. Really find out who the best mentor is, who can help you have your biggest shifts.
Awesome, Bevan. That was an incredible session. Thank you so much for generously sharing all of that information with us. I'm sure that there is something in that for everybody. So on behalf of the PT Council of New Zealand, thank you so much for your time and your wisdom. Thank you to everybody. Thank you to everybody else who attended. And for now, we'll shut down this webinar, and I will wish you a wonderful rest of the day, everybody. Enjoy your weekend, and we'll see you again next time.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.